Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Rock Painting Workshops. Today we are going to create this dragonfly on a sunflower, and I'm going to show you a few different ways of shading today. So you might be familiar with our blog post, 4 ways of shading, where I show you different techniques. And so today I'm going to mix it up and show them to you in a rock tutorial so you can see for yourself how it comes out. So I'm going to paint my rock in the yellow, and the trick is a lot of people have trouble with yellow and white sometimes, and in paint pens that definitely needs to be shaken up a little bit more than all the other colors to get the formula right. As well as that, don't go too thick just to keep coloring it in. So you'll see on the middle section of my rock, it's not that even, it's not perfect yet. There's bits of translucent areas on the rock. So don't worry about that. Keep going. You still only want that light thin layer of yellow on your rock. So when you come back, this will dry. By the time I've gone the whole way around the flower, the beginning will be dry again. So then you can just add another thin layer like we're doing now, and you will then get a nice opaque finish. So just keep colouring all the way around, colour the middle areas, get that sunflower fully done in yellow. Okay, last little bit there. So yeah, you can watch and totally see the outcome that I'm getting just from putting that thin layer on. And I'm not going to worry about it until I come back for the second layer, as I said. Now, I won't bore you with colouring in all the blue bits, but I'll just show you all the sections of the sky that are coming through. You just want to paint those in blue. So I'll go ahead, I'll colour in all the background and everything later, but I'll just pop in some of the dragonfly colours now. And I'm going to do the top of the top wings in lilac, and we'll go, I'm not too sure about the eyes just yet, but I'm going to go the aqua on the head, and I'm just adding in the colours that I saw on the rock that inspired me. It wasn't a rock that inspired me, it was a watercolour picture in a journal that I saw, and I'll pop her name down of who inspired me there, but I'm just sort of using some of the base colours that she used as well. So she was using watercolour, and you can use watercolour on your rock, but if you're putting it outside, I really recommend that you use acrylic paint pens. And so at the end of this, I will have a watercolour look, but I've put all the stability behind it all with acrylic paint. Okay, the paint pens I'm using are acrylic paint pens, and so it's got a lot more pigment in it, so it'll be a lot stable to put outside in the UV light. And here I am colouring in with my 1MR, and the trick to that, I don't recommend colouring in large spaces with it because a lot of people sort of start clogging it up. And the trick is to press really lightly. Okay, feel the weight of the pen and don't apply any more pressure than the weight that you're feeling. Just go back and pop those eyes in with the aqua green as well. That's one layer. Here we go, I've got my water, I've got 2 layers on my rock, my microfiber cloth, and I've got my paintbrush. And I'm going to start my shading here. So I've coloured in all the areas, and I've got the 2 thin layers on it. So we've got 2 layers on the rock, and I'm going to start, the first shading technique I'm going to start with is the one we use most days, and that is where I wet the brush and give it a bit of a smush. But I'll show you, you can paint straight onto it. As long as the paint pen is still wet, you can wet your paintbrush, just make it damp, get rid of any excess water, and just smush those edges around. want it more darker on that outer edge there. So when I come to smush it, I'm not going to even touch the outer area. I'm just touching the inner area and smushing that down so it blends nicely. Right, scribble straight on with the blue. I've got the brush again, paintbrush that's damp, and I'm just going to smush exactly the same technique again. I want it darker on the edges, so on the inner part there. I'm just giving that a smush. I'm not touching the darker areas towards the outside. That's probably a bit too much. Okay, so don't be worried about that. I'm just bringing that lighter color and just touching a little bit more blue in because I went a bit overboard with the darker blue. Okay. I've just got the darker emerald and I'll smush that on here and go down the dragonfly. I'm going to add some to his body, but I'm also going to bring in some of that blue. So I'm going to do two colors of shading here. You don't have to do light aqua, dark aqua, you know. So I'm going to show you here and just bring some of the blue down on the body and show you that you can shade with whatever colors you want. Oh, it didn't come out really dark. I'm going to scribble bits straight on it. As long as that paint pen is still wet, you'll be able to smush that with your damp brush. And here I'm just adding in the shadow area behind the flower. So where the edges of the flower and the petal are, you can just smush in some darker blue there, and that creates the shadow. I think it must be like a dragonfly time because I did one last week. I've got this one here, but in my sketchbook last night, I actually sketched up another one. So you're getting 3 dragonflies quite close together. We'll have to look up like what day is dedicated to dragonflies. Okay. So I'm going to, before I start showing you a different way of shading than what I usually do, I'm going to just color in, not color in, I'm going to add the shading in some orange. So you can see you don't have to take a darker yellow. I'm taking this orange with my damp brush and I'm smushing that around the outside edges. I'm just creating a bit of depth on the outer there. Going around to each petal and just smushing some of the orange. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing because I want it to replicate that watercolor look. And so I'm just sort of adding it there and thinking, if it was watercolor, where would it flow? It just goes sometimes where it wants to go. And here again, I'm showing you that you don't have to shade with the same color. So we're just going to add some pink in as some of the shading color on the sunflower. And we'll give it some scribbles. Again, I don't want it too precise because I am trying to pull off a watercolor look, so which is never going to be exact lines. So it's just sort of smushing out the pen. A lot of people have asked what smushing means, and I don't know. It's just the word for I don't know what this technique is called, so I just named it smushing. So it's not something you can look up in an art dictionary. It doesn't tell you. It's just the N word for do this, but I don't know what this is called. So here is another shading technique that I said I'd show you today, and that is using dots to shade. So you can see I put the dots quite closely together in these corners, and that creates some shading and some darker interest areas in those points there. Pop some in his eyes. And you just, if you want it to be darker, you put the dots closer together. And as you want it to lighten out, you just spread the dots further apart and they will sort of ease out. But what I'm going to do here is create some bigger dots. So I've got my 5M pen. I'm just going to put down a few bigger dots. A little bit of smooshing, just decided I didn't need a bit more orange in the petals. So I'm just looking at balance all the time, and I sort of looked at it and thought there's not enough orange in the petals, it's too much pink. So now I'm just looking at adding a bit more orange as I go. Right, look at it. I just want to add some pink dots, so I'm looking at sharpening up my pink areas. Oh my God. Just add in some dots where you want them. What I'm showing you is that acrylic paint is opaque and it's what we call layerable. So it doesn't matter, you know, I'm tossing up between how much is too much pink, how much is too much orange, but you can see how I've just been able to layer them on top of each other and they pick up the new color. So I can add some of the pink dots in for my shading as well. And I've already balanced out that orange. So you can see I can just add straight on top. And they're nice and opaque and they sit, the fresh color just sits on top. Here I've gone in, I've got my 3M pen now, so I've gone down a nib size and I'm getting a finer dot, but it's kind of like, you know, when you do watercolors and you do a bit of a splat across your work. I'm sort of trying to give it that kind of look where the, you know, I'm sort of showing that, oh look, my paintbrush just sort of splattered out the color everywhere. And technically that's not what happened. Going with that ruby red, just adding little bits of ruby red in for some depth as well, not going too much with the red, just a little bit for shading and getting a little bit of depth there. Always stopping and looking and thinking as I go, and got my yellow pen back and just adding some dash there. You can see again how I was talking about how it's layerable. I can go straight over the top of those darker colors with my yellow and it's really opaque and perfect, so I can add dots and dashes. And even on top of the darker red, that yellow's picking up really brilliantly. Okay. I always just want to have a stop, have a look at it, go, is that enough? Is that too much? And that's how I've decided if I needed to add a little bit more orange, a little bit of yellow, was I just stop and look at it for a minute and think, what do you want? What does this picture need? And once I'm happy with it, I'm just grabbing the black pen now and doing all the outlines of the dragonfly, as well as adding in a few black dots for shading as I go. Now what I want to do with this outline, because I've got such a all over the place kind of look, is I don't want real solid black lines. I want a real wishy-washy, scribbly kind of look. So with that, you're just going to take the black pen and go back and forth, and usually not in the same spot. So you're just going to pick up, the outlines are going to be a couple of lines of black instead of one thin, even, perfect line. You just want to keep scribbling and coming around and adding in the second line there, which is totally off from the first line. Get that real scribbly look happening. The hardest thing about painting with these fine pens is there's just one slight angle that the pen doesn't like to work on, and that's the angle I need to get the video right for you. So when you see, like, you know, sometimes the paint pen's not working, it's just because I have to hold it at the angle so that the camera can still see what I'm doing. But It's a bit of a pain to try and get it to work, but that's okay. We just keep going back and forth, and you can see I'm scribbling, I'm disconnecting from a solid line. I'm getting a real scribbly look there. There, again, it's just the wrong angle. But you can see I'm just going to keep scribbling my way around those petals and giving it that look that I'm going for. And obviously, as you're going around it, just a bit of a yawn there in the middle, as you're going around the rock, you want to go so that the work is going away from you, so that you're not leaning on wet pen. So you can see I'm moving the rock around in an anti-clockwise direction, and I just keep scribbling. So the wet paint's going off to the left and it's moving around anti-clockwise. So my hand is in no danger of touching on it and smudging it. There's just little things like that that you want to think about, as well as I'm leaning on top of Bert, my pet rock. So my hand is resting on him. The pinky side of my hand is raising my hand higher. So I'm working down onto the rock. And that's also another easier way of painting on the rock, is to paint down on it rather than if you're just leaning on the table height, you're sort of trying to paint upwards a little bit because the rock is raised, not like it would be if it was a journal or a flat canvas. So Bert's handy for everything, testing pens, raising your hand up. You can lean your rock on him to get the angle that you want. And Bert loves a scribble. So that's it. That is, I'll just grab my white pen and add some highlights. Little reflection dots around the place. You can add it into your shading. But this is going to be my dragonfly. And what I'll do over on the blog, and I'll pop it on Facebook as well, is who inspired me to do this rock. And I really can't wait to look, how do I say that? I look forward to seeing your rocks on Facebook, and I might try and record later in the day from now on, so I have the right words to share with you. So join us over on Facebook at Reef Rocks Free Workshops, and I'll catch up with you during the day there.